Okay, the example we were going to edit was the client advice notes and not the backup. And to actually open the editor, we want to click on this sort of triangular ruler with the pencil. We want to left click that. And this will take a little bit to load, but this will be the editor for the template, and there are quite a lot of controls here. Okay, so let's get a high level overview of what's going on the screen here. Items you can add to the printout template are on the left hand side here. These ones you just left click and drag and drop into the template. Once it's inside this sort of center area of the screen or on the document itself, and you've left clicked an item, this bounding box or rectangle with white dots indicates you've selected an item, and you can then interact with it with the controls. Up here, for example, cut, copy, and paste. I don't think keyboard shortcuts work for these. And of course the delete button, so let's press that, and the undo and redo buttons are here as well, so that's good to know. This control up here is to zoom in and out of the template, so to adjust the zoom you do have a sort of shortcut here to get really close or far away. This becomes useful when you're working with items you've sort of dragged in, not the ones already existing, because they are in what's called a table and cell sort of layout, so you can't really move them around as much. But for example, for this label we dragged in earlier, we can left click, hold and drag, and you'll notice that various snapping and grid lines will show up, trying to sort of best align them with the items on the screen. And you might want to zoom in to get more precise with how you line the items up, so that would be the reason for using this set of controls. Summary of what we've covered so far: items that we can add in on the left hand side. The ones we'll be most interested in are most likely the checkbox and the label. I personally haven't used anything else besides that, and perhaps the image if you want to add in a logo. With individual items selected, you do have your cut, copy, paste, delete, undo, redo up here, and your zoom in and zoom out over here. Now these next four buttons are fairly important. This X over here is the close. This is the save. Remember to save as you go. This is the validate bindings button. And now what this does is basically check if you have successfully mapped a database field to a label, for example, and that's indicated by this little database or cylinder icon on the right here. Basically, these fields are drawing information from the database, and if any issues arise with them, they will actually be colored in red. And to check that, you'd quickly left click on this validate data bindings and scroll through the document using your mouse scroll wheel, and any issues will be highlighted in red. So just bear that in mind as you go along. You'll be sort of saving, validating and testing, and of course using this preview button to actually see what it would sort of look like as you printed the item out. And notice that label we had from earlier. It might not be too obvious, but when you're actually in this screen, besides the exporting and printing controls, these are obviously quite familiar because they're the same ones that appear when you actually go to print this out on the service. But the exception here would be the designer button here, which if you left click gets you back into this view about the right side of the screen here. So this cogwheel icon is the properties, and essentially that's the look, the behavior, and perhaps what data loads for the item you have currently selected. So if I left click on this client ID here, you'll notice that it is a table cell. The name is table cell 4, and it's loading this data, the client ID. The data binding field is what sort of grabs information from the database. So just for short, the cogwheel here is the look, the feel, and the data of the selected item. It does have a set of buttons here to do with moving the item around and centering it. So just remember those exist as well, but they're not too important. In the middle here we have the field list, and that sort of sits underneath the SQL data source. And you can just see that these are all the fields, including your custom fields. This is the testing site, so there will be some odd fields here and there, just ignore that. But what I would do is actually ignore the prefix of CLS get. So just ignore those two words and just read the end parts. So this is going to be the collection of service fields, the service action fields, the additional party fields, the client information, etc. There will be some sort of unique fields here, which will just be, specific to your center and your user, such as the logged in person or the name of your center. You can see here that everything's there, your logo, your name, postcode, etc. So that's under your business profile info, and the current user, their time zone, and the stuff you find under their worker profile is essentially available here as well. Okay, so for short, this is the field list in the middle here, and perhaps the most important thing to know about this as well is it is also the place where you can add a calculated field, which is a bit of logic that will allow you to sort of create some more advanced behavior with the actual bits and bobs of the printout template. Over here is the report explorer, and that's just everything in here, literally everything. Unfortunately, by default, all of these aren't really named, so you might have noticed I've actually changed the name here. So maybe your first order of business is to actually bring order to chaos here a bit and name the high-level table elements by left-clicking on them to highlight them, and then scrolling till you sort of see the bounding box I called it earlier, that I've selected the problem type details sort of area. And if I open up the properties here, and you'll remember under design, the design portion of the properties, that the name is here, which is what shows up in the hierarchy. So I'll just quickly call this the problem type details table with an underscore, just to make it more readable. But that might be your first order of business. So you can already see that I've left click here, and then I'll do the same here. I'll say this is the legacies table, and sort of do that in your own time. You can choose not to do this, but you may find it more helpful for your future self if you have to keep looking at this template, that you actually know whereabouts in the document you are from the Report Explorer.